Well, I have a little story about a guy named Sebastian Salgado. He was growing up in this Brazilian state called Minas Gerais. And they had a bunch of, lived in a tropical forest with all types of vegetation and wild animals. And he spent much of his youth exploring that jungle. And over the years, he developed a real love for the areas he used to play as a child. But in the years that followed, he worked as a photographer that gave him the opportunity to travel the world. He published several books, he won many awards, and however, going into war-torn areas and witnessing firsthand so many violent events, it left him physically and mentally exhausted. And for the sake of his health, he and his wife decided to move back to Brazil. When he arrived, he was stunned by what he saw. The dense jungle he used to play in as a child had been completely destroyed. In the short time that he'd been away, companies cut down all the trees and taken the wood to use in construction projects throughout the whole country. With the removal of the trees, the rest of the plants died, and the wildlife that once thrived there left with it. Where there was abundant life, there was nothing but stones and dust. Then Sebastian's wife had an idea. She said that they should try to grow the forest back again by planting trees. Such a large area had been devastated that it seemed impossible to bring it back to life again. But they couldn't allow the land to remain lifeless. So they did what they could, bringing in soil and planting saplings. Then soon others joined them. And to promote their work and to raise funds for the massive project, they started what is called the Land Institute. In the years that followed, they planted over 4 million trees. So as a result of their efforts, say over 20 years, the forest has come back to life. Not only are the plants and trees growing, but wild animals have returned. The Instituto Tierra estimates that some 172 types of birds now call that area home, along with 33 species of mammals, 293 types of plants, and 15 species of reptiles. So because of their humble efforts and their persistence, they were able to restore the jungle to its former glory. So when we look at the state of the church today, we might feel as stunned as Sebastian Salgado and see how what he and his wife saw, how devastated their forest of Minas Gerais was. It might not seem like the growing church that we grew up in, where masses were once standing room only. We see empty pews and empty rows of seats. We know that something has to be done, but we're not sure what to do or even where to start. We fear that anything we do will be too little and too late. That is why the parables today in this gospel speak so strongly to us. When Sebastian Salgado and his wife were able to do for the forest Brazil, Jesus wants to do for his church. Jesus shows us the way. But first of all, he calls us to start small. Just as Sebastian Salgado and his wife started in planting saplings, Jesus calls us to plant seeds. And sometimes the needs of our church seem so large that we think there's nothing we can do. Our efforts seem so small in the face of all the pain and suffering around us. We can ask ourselves, what's the use? That is when Jesus gives the example of the mustard seed. It seems so small, but carries so much life within it. Just so, our small efforts, when they are done with love, can have huge effects. Even if we only feed one person, at least that person won't go hungry that day. And maybe that person can be so moved by love that they will return around and do something else for someone else. There's no telling the ripple effects of our actions. But one thing is for sure, however, if we do nothing because we are afraid or think we have nothing to offer, then nothing will change. So Jesus is challenging us to start small. And secondly, Jesus is calling to trust that he will give growth to these small seed plants. That is the point of his first parable today. Once the farmer puts the seed in the ground, it grows by its own power. Just so, God will have his power behind whatever we do out of love. It is true that God needs our church and our world that are great. But we are not starting from scratch. We are building the work on which Jesus has already begun, and the Holy Spirit is bringing it to completion. And that is why in today's second reading, St. Paul tells us to walk by faith and not by sight. As Christians, we don't measure success by the way the world does. The world relies on numbers and on dollar signs. However, as followers of Jesus, we measure success by how faithfully we do God's will. If we are saying yes to everything God is calling us to, we will be successful. Just as a seed grows secretly underground, so God's plan is working itself out in the world hidden by powerful ways. If we do our part, no matter how small and insignificant it may seem, good will come of it. And finally, Jesus is calling us to be welcoming. The church is that mustard tree that, since the death and resurrection of Jesus, has become the largest of plants, giving shelter to every type of person. The church is meant to be a home for every person on this planet without exception. And there is no one who is not called to be baptized in this church and to be part of its mission. It is up to each of us to invite our family, our friends, and even strangers to join us in this great adventure. Like the seed, it seems reaching out to one person at a time, letting them know that they are important to us and that we are not all that we can be without them. If we are to grow as a church, there is no other way than to do it by reaching out, befriending people, and inviting them to find their home in the branches of this great church planted by Jesus Christ. Because we believe in Jesus Christ, we are a people of hope. As pressing as the problems of our world and our church are, we have everything we need to resolve them because we have the Spirit of Jesus dwelling within us. It is a time for us to stop worrying and a time to start working. If we start small, trust in God's power working through us, and reach out to others, miracles can happen. We can start to see the signs of life sprout up all around us, and the world and the church can be renewed.